Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again with your late night creature feature. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's see what tonight's tale brings us. The eternal gift. I learned that lesson the hard way. And now, well, I'm going to share it with you. Consider it a gift. I'm generous like that these days. It's not like the movies make it out to be, you know, working with bodies, no creepy music following you around, no flickering lights every time you walk into a room, no cold spots or whispered voices. It's just quiet, the quietest job I ever had. And after 3 years of waitressing at a Denny's off the interstate, listening to drunk truckers complain about their eggs at 2 in the morning, quiet sounded pretty damn good. My name's Frasier, or it was, anyway. We'll get to that part later. I was 26 years old when I started working at Hartwell and Sons Funeral Home in Millbrook, Ohio, population 800 and something, depending on who's died recently. Little funeral humor for you. The kind of town where everybody knows everybody, where the biggest excitement is Friday night high school football, and where nothing ever happens. That's what I thought, anyway. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. I'd moved to Millbrook 3 months earlier, running from a string of bad decisions in Columbus. Bad boyfriend, bad apartment, bad job at a call center where I spent 8 hours a day getting screamed at by people who couldn't figure out why their cable wasn't working. By the end, I was drinking a bottle of wine every night and crying in the shower every morning, and I knew something had to change. So I picked a random spot on the map, somewhere small, somewhere quiet, somewhere nobody would know my name or my history, or the way I'd let my life fall apart one terrible choice at a time. Millbrook seemed perfect. Cheap rent, friendly people, the kind of place where you could disappear into a simple life and never look back. I should have asked myself why the rent was so cheap, why the people were so friendly, why a town that small had a funeral home that big. But I didn't. I was too tired, too desperate, too ready to believe that things could finally get better. Hartwell and Sons has been around since 1912. It's one of those old Victorian buildings they converted back when funeral parlor was still the term people used. 3 stories of dark wood and heavy curtains and rooms that smell like lilies and furniture polish. The kind of place that probably has a lot of stories in its walls, more than I knew at the time. The building itself seemed to watch you. I know how that sounds crazy, paranoid, the kind of thing someone says right before they get committed. But from the first day I walked through those doors, I felt it. A presence, an awareness. Like the walls had eyes and the floors had ears and something in the basement was listening to every word. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Old buildings feel weird. That's just how it is. All that history soaked into the wood and the stone. All those decades of grief and loss, of course it feels heavy. Of course it feels like something's watching. But knowing something rationally and believing it in your gut are 2 different things. Mr. Hartwell, the current one, 3rd generation, hired me to help with viewings, paperwork, general prep work. The stuff that doesn't require a license, just a strong stomach and a willingness to work nights. I've got both. Had both. Grammar gets weird when you're not entirely sure what tense your existence operates in anymore, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The night it happened was a Thursday, January 16th. I remember the date because it was supposed to be my day off, and I had plans. Netflix, wine, a frozen pizza. The kind of glamorous single girl evening that really makes you question your life choices. Instead, I got a phone call around 4 in the afternoon. Carol, I'm so sorry to ask, but I've got a family emergency. Mr. Hartwell sounded tired, stressed, genuinely apologetic, which I appreciated. My mother took a fall down in Columbus. I need to drive down tonight, make sure she's okay." "Of course, Mr. Hartwell. I hope she's all right." "You're a lifesaver." If only he knew how ironic that would turn out to be. "We've got the crane service tomorrow at 9 a.m. Everything's prepped. I just need someone there overnight to make sure the flowers get delivered in the morning and the chairs are set up right in the main room. Can you handle it?" "Absolutely. No problem. Keys are under the mat. I'll be back by 7 a.m. at the latest. Call me if anything comes up." Nothing's going to come up, I thought. It's a funeral home. What could possibly happen? Famous last words, right? In my defense, nobody expects their boring Thursday night to end with demonic resurrection and cult sacrifice. That's not in most job descriptions. So that's how I found myself alone at Hartwell and Sons as the sun went down, with a storm rolling in from the west and a dead man named Silas Crane lying in a very expensive casket in the main viewing room. Let me tell you about Silas. 87 years old, died peacefully in his sleep, according to the official paperwork. Pillar of the community, wealthy family that had been in Millbrook since before Millbrook had a name. His funeral was expected to be the biggest the town had seen in years. Half the county was supposedly coming to pay their respects. The guest book at the viewing earlier that week had more signatures than a high school yearbook. Everyone loved Silas Crane. Everyone had a story about him. He donated money to rebuild the elementary school after the fire in '92. He'd paid for the new wing at the community hospital. He'd helped countless families through hard times with loans that somehow never needed to be repaid. He'd been on the town council for 40 years, the school board for 30, the hospital board for 20. A saint, basically. That's what people called him. Saint Silas, the heart of Millbrook. Funny thing, though. Looking back now, I realize nobody ever talked about his family. His wife had died decades ago, that much I knew from the obituary. But no children, no grandchildren, no relatives at all, as far as I could tell. Just Silas, alone in that big house on the hill, beloved by everyone and close to no one. That should have been a red flag. In a town that size, everyone has family, everyone has connections. Nobody exists in isolation unless they're hiding something. But I didn't think about that. Not then. I'd never met him alive, just saw him there in the casket when I came in to check on things around 6 p.m. Old man in an expensive charcoal suit with silver pinstripes, silver hair combed neat and precise. Hands folded over his chest, a gold ring with a strange symbol on his right hand that I didn't recognize. Face arranged in that peaceful expression they're so good at creating in this business. The ring caught my attention for some reason. I found myself staring at it while I checked the flower arrangements. It was old, really old, the kind of antique that belongs in a museum. The symbol etched into the gold looked like overlapping circles with lines radiating outward, almost like a stylized sun, or an eye, or something that was both and neither. I felt a chill when I looked at it, just for a second, just a flutter of wrongness that passed so quickly I convinced myself I'd imagined it. He looked like someone's grandfather, someone's kind, gentle, cookie-baking grandfather who probably told bad jokes at Thanksgiving and slipped kids $5 bills when their parents weren't looking. Funny how wrong you can be about a person. But at that point, he was just another body. Just another old man who'd lived a long life and died in his bed and was about to be put in the ground with flowers and prayers and people saying nice things about him whether they meant them or not. I didn't give him a second thought, just made sure the casket was positioned right, the flowers around it were arranged nicely, and moved on to setting up chairs. The main viewing room at Hartwell and Sons can hold about 60 people if you pack them in. High ceilings with dark wood beams. Burgundy wallpaper with a subtle pattern that looked like vines or veins, depending on how you looked at it. Heavy curtains on the windows. And that smell every funeral home has it, lilies and chemicals and something underneath that you can never quite identify, something sweet and wrong. For the crane service, Mr. Hartwell wanted seating for 50 with room to stand along the walls, so I spent about an hour hauling folding chairs from the storage closet and setting them up in neat rows. It's boring work, mind-numbing, the kind of task that lets you zone out and think about other things. Like how quiet the building was. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. I'd worked late shifts before, stayed past midnight a few times when we had early morning services, but it had never felt like this. Never felt like the silence was watching me. Like how the wind was starting to pick up outside, making the old building creak in ways I hadn't noticed before. The Victorian frame groaned and popped like an old man settling into a chair. Pipes rattled in the walls. Somewhere upstairs, a door swung shut with a soft click that made me freeze mid-step. Just the wind, I told myself. Just pressure changes. Old buildings breathe. Like how every once in a while, out of the corner of my eye, I could have sworn the curtains moved even though all the windows were closed. Just a flutter. Just a ripple in the heavy burgundy fabric. When I looked directly at them, they were perfectly still, but the moment I turned away, like how the temperature seemed to drop whenever I walked past the casket, just a few degrees, just enough to notice, just enough to raise goosebumps on my arms and make me walk a little faster. And like how the flowers around the casket seemed different every time I looked at them. Not moved, exactly, just rearranged. The lilies that had been on the left were now on the right. The roses that had been closed were now open, small things. Things I could have imagined, things I told myself I was imagining. But that's just your imagination, right? Old buildings settle, air moves in weird ways, flowers don't rearrange themselves. You're alone in a funeral home at night, surrounded by dead bodies in cold storage and a dead man in a box 6 feet away. Of course you're going to feel a little jumpy. I told myself that over and over. I almost believed it. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. The sound was so loud in the silence, so sudden, that my heart hammered for a full minute afterward. I laughed at myself, nervous, shaky laughter, and kept setting up chairs. But I noticed I was working faster now, moving quicker, spending less time in the viewing room than I needed to. I noticed I was avoiding looking at the casket. The first genuinely weird thing happened around 7:30. I was adjusting the angle of a chair in the 3rd row when I heard a sound from the casket. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft thump, like someone had knocked gently on the inside of the lid. I froze, listened, heart suddenly pounding in my ears. Nothing. Settling, I said out loud. Bodies shift sometimes. Gases escape. It's natural. It's science. It's fine. I did not walk over to check. I did not look at the casket. I just kept adjusting chairs and tried to convince myself that my hands weren't shaking. 3 minutes later, it happened again. Thump. Softer this time. Almost. Questioning. Nope, I said, also out loud. Nope, nope, nope. You're dead, Mr. Crane. You stay dead. That's how this works. I finished the chairs in record time and got the hell out of that room. The rest of the building wasn't much better. Hartwell and Sons is old in the way that American buildings rarely get to be old, over 100 years of memories soaked into the walls. Over 100 years of grief and loss and the slow business of death, seeping into the wood and the plaster and the very foundation. The hallways were too long, the shadows were too deep. The portraits on the walls, previous Hartwells, going back generations, all of them with the same cold eyes and thin smiles seemed to follow me with their gaze. I could feel them watching as I walked past. Judging, waiting. I set up shop at the reception desk near the front door. Good visibility, multiple exits, and most importantly, as far from the viewing room as I could get while still technically being in the building. The storm was supposed to pass north of us. That's what the weather app said when I checked around 6. Just a little rain, maybe some wind, nothing to worry about. By 7, the sky had turned that sick green-yellow color that means God's about to throw a tantrum. By 8, the wind was howling hard enough to make the old Victorian frame creak and groan like a ship in rough seas. The rain came down in sheets, hammering against the windows like it was trying to get inside. And by 8:30, standing in the main viewing room with all 50 chairs arranged perfectly, I heard the first rumble of thunder. Not distant, not the kind that rolls in slowly. This was immediate, overhead, like something enormous clearing its throat right above the building. The lights flickered. Just once, just for a second, but in that second, I looked at the casket, and I could have sworn Silas Crane's eyes were open. Then the lights steadied, and he was exactly as he'd been before. Eyes closed, hands folded, peaceful. "Get it together, Carol," I said out loud. Talking to yourself is the first sign of madness, but talking to yourself in a funeral home at night during a storm is just good sense. The sound of a human voice, even your own, helps keep the creepy at bay. I walked over to the casket anyway, just to check, just to make sure. He looked exactly the same, dead, still. The makeup they'd applied made his skin look almost waxy in the overhead light. I stared at his eyelids for a long moment, watching for any movement. Nothing. "You're losing it," I told myself. 2 weeks on the job and you're already seeing things. Great career choice, Carol. I turned around and went back to adjusting chairs that didn't need adjusting. The power went out at 9:13 p.m. I know the exact time because I just checked my phone, thinking about texting Mr. Hartwell an update when everything went dark. And I mean dark. No streetlights visible through the windows. The storm had knocked those out too. No glow from neighboring buildings in rural Ohio. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away. No emergency lights kicking on. This was an old building. Apparently nobody had updated the electrical since the Carter administration. Just pure, absolute, complete darkness. The kind of darkness that feels solid. The kind that presses against your eyes and makes you question whether they're even open. The kind that humans aren't meant to experience. I stood there frozen at the reception desk, one hand still reaching for my phone, my breath suddenly loud in my ears. The storm was howling outside, wind screaming, rain hammering, but inside, beneath all that noise, was a deeper silence, a waiting silence. Something was different. Something had changed in the instant the lights went out. I fumbled for my phone, found it, pressed the button. The screen lit up. 12% battery. Because of course. I switched on the flashlight and swept the beam across the reception area, the front desk, the waiting chairs, the door to the hallway. Everything looked normal. Then why did my heart feel like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest? "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed strangely. "Is anyone there?" No response. Of course, no response. I was alone. Wasn't I? I heard something. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. From down the hall, from the direction of the viewing room. A sliding sound, like something heavy being dragged across carpet, like wood moving against wood. Like a casket being pushed open. "It's nothing," I whispered. "It's the building settling. It's the storm. It's nothing." I did not believe myself, not even a little, but I had to check. That's the thing about being alone in a scary situation. There's nobody else to send. No boyfriend to tell, "Go see what that noise was." No roommate to volunteer as tribute. Just me and my dying phone and a sound that absolutely should not exist. I walked down the hallway toward the viewing room. Each step felt like a small act of courage. The flashlight beam wobbled ahead of me, throwing crazy shadows against the walls. The portraits of the Hartwell ancestors seemed to leer in the moving light. Their eyes were just paint on canvas, but I could have sworn they were tracking me. I reached the viewing room door. It was closed. I was almost certain I'd left it open. My hand found the doorknob. The metal was cold, colder than it should have been. I turned it, pushed the door open, and saw that the casket had moved. Not a lot, maybe 3 feet, but it had definitely moved. I could see the marks in the carpet where it had been. Now it was closer to the center of the room, closer to the door, closer to me, and it was open. The lid was up, all the way up, yawning wide like a mouth frozen mid-scream. The white satin interior gleamed in my flashlight beam, but the interior was empty. Silas Crane was gone. For about 5 seconds, my brain tried to rationalize. Maybe there'd been an earthquake. Maybe the storm had shaken the building hard enough to move the casket. Maybe Silas had rolled out and was on the floor somewhere. I actually got down on my hands and knees with the flashlight and looked under the chairs, under the casket, behind the flower arrangements. Nothing, nobody, no body. That's when the lights came back on, and I screamed, because Silas Crane was standing in the corner of the room, not lying down, not propped up, standing on his own 2 feet. His eyes were open, wide open, and they were wrong. The color was wrong. What had been roomy blue was now something darker, deeper, like looking into a well that went down forever. He wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, just standing there in his expensive suit with his hands at his sides, staring at me with those bottomless eyes. "Mr. Crane." My voice came out as a whisper. "Mr. Crane, how are you?" He smiled, and I knew in that instant, in my gut, in my bones, that whatever was standing in that corner wasn't Silas Crane anymore. Maybe it was wearing his body. Maybe it was using his face. But the thing looking at me through those eyes was something else entirely. Something old, something patient, something hungry. The lights flickered again, off for 1 second, 2 seconds. When they came back on, he was closer, 10 feet away now instead of 20, still smiling, still not breathing. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. Some situations call for rational assessment. Some situations call for getting the fuck out as fast as your legs can carry you. I sprinted through the viewing room door, down the main hallway, toward the front entrance. My keys were in my purse. My purse was at the reception desk. My car was in the parking lot. I had a plan. Get keys, get outside, get in car, drive until Ohio is a memory. I grabbed my purse, yanked open the front door, and stopped. The parking lot was full of people. My brain couldn't process it at first. There hadn't been anyone out there 5 minutes ago. I'd looked out the window. I'd seen my car sitting alone in the empty lot, rain hammering its windshield, the parking lines barely visible through the downpour. Now there were dozens of them, maybe 50, maybe more. I couldn't count, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare. They were standing in the rain, in the howling wind, in weather that should have had anyone with sense huddled inside. They were arranged in a perfect circle around the building, not random, not scattered, but precisely positioned like they'd been placed there with a ruler and a protractor. Each one exactly the same distance from the next, each one facing the funeral home, facing me. And they were all wearing dark, hooded cloaks, heavy fabric, almost like robes, that hung to the ground and hid everything, their bodies, their hands, their faces. The cloaks were black, or maybe dark red, hard to tell in the stormlight. They looked old, ancient, the kind of garments you'd see in a medieval painting or a nightmare. All I could see were shadows under those hoods, shadows where faces should be. None of them moved. Not a twitch, not a shift, not a single adjustment despite the wind trying to tear the cloaks from their bodies. They stood like statues, like they'd been there for hours, like they'd been there forever, waiting for this exact moment. The rain pounded down on them, streaming off the hoods, pooling at their feet, but they didn't flinch, didn't seek shelter, didn't show any sign that they even noticed the storm raging around them. That's when I knew, really knew, in my gut, in my bones, that whatever was happening here was beyond anything I could understand, beyond anything rational, beyond anything that belonged in the world I thought I lived in. Lightning flashed, and in that instant of white light, the shadows under the hoods receded just enough for me to see. Faces. I recognized some of them. Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store, the sweet old lady who always asked about my day and gave me coupons she'd clipped. Her face was slack, expressionless, her eyes reflecting the lightning like mirrors. Deputy Mike, who'd waved at me last Tuesday, who'd told me to have a nice day with that friendly small-town smile. His jaw hung slightly open, lips moving in words I couldn't hear. The old couple who ran the antique shop on Main Street, who'd sold me a vintage lamp my first week in town. They stood hand in hand, swaying slightly, their eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my stomach turn. The mailman, the woman from the coffee shop, the mechanic who'd fixed my car last month, the librarian, the pharmacist, the teenagers who worked at the gas station. Half the goddamn town was standing in that parking lot, silent, unmoving, watching me with expressions that weren't quite right, smiling, some of them, smiling too wide, smiling like they'd been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time, like they'd been waiting for me. Lightning flashed again, and in the distance, beyond the circle, I saw more of them, coming across the fields, emerging from the darkness in all directions, dozens more, maybe hundreds. Dark shapes moving through the rain, converging on the funeral home like iron filings drawn to a magnet, converging on me. I stumbled backward, slammed the door, locked it, threw the deadbolt, like that would help, like a piece of wood and some metal hardware could stop whatever was happening outside. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely control them. My breath was coming in short, sharp gasps. Panic. Full-blown panic. The kind that makes your vision tunnel and your thoughts scatter like startled birds. Think, Carol. Think. You have to think. Back door. There had to be a back door. Every building has more than one exit. Fire codes. Safety regulations. I ran. Through the reception area, my feet pounding on the hardwood floor, past the chapel with its rows of empty pews, its stained glass windows depicting scenes of resurrection that suddenly seemed sinister, past the arrangement room with its books of casket options, past Mr. Hartwell's office with its family photos, generations of Hartwells, all of them probably part of this, all of them waiting for tonight. Deeper into the building, toward the back. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered. The shadows seemed darker. The portraits on the walls seemed to be watching me. The embalming room was at the rear of the first floor. I'd only been in there once, and it had given me the creeps even then. Steel tables with drains running to holes in the floor. Chemical storage cabinets with warning labels. Tools that looked like they belonged in a horror movie, trocars and forceps, and things I didn't want to think about. And a service entrance, a heavy metal door that led to the back parking lot. That was my escape. I burst through the embalming room door, skidded across the tile floor. The room smelled like formaldehyde and something organic and wrong. The service entrance was 10 feet away. I could see the small window set into the heavy metal. I could see freedom. Through the small window in the door, I could see more of them. Another circle, another wall of hooded figures, standing in the rain, facing the building. Their hoods dripped water. Their robes were soaked through, but they didn't move. Just stood there, patient as stone, waiting. No, I breathed. No, 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 no. I pressed my face against the glass. looking for a gap, a weakness. There were none. They were shoulder to shoulder, an unbroken ring of darkness. I was trapped. I spent the next 10 minutes checking every possible exit, running from room to room, window to window, the basement door figures waiting at the window wells, pale faces pressed against the glass. The side entrance, more figures, dozens of them. Every window in the building had hooded figures standing outside it, patient, silent, waiting. Not trying to get in, just waiting, like they knew I had nowhere to go. The lights in the building flickered back on, but now they weren't flickering randomly. They were pulsing, dimming, and brightening in a rhythm that felt deliberate, like the building itself had a heartbeat, like something was waking up. And from somewhere deep in the funeral home somewhere below me, I heard chanting. Low at first, almost subliminal, but it grew. Voices layered on voices, speaking words in a language I didn't recognize, words that seemed to twist in the air, words that made my head ache. The chanting was coming from everywhere and nowhere, from the walls, from the floor, from the very air around me, and it was getting louder. I ended up in the casket showroom on the second floor. Don't ask me why I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just moving, just trying to put distance between myself and the chanting, just trying to find somewhere to hide, somewhere to think, somewhere to pretend for a few more minutes that I might actually survive this night. The showroom was full of display models. 12 caskets arranged on pedestals around the room, each one open to show the interior, each one with a little price tag like this was a car dealership and death was just another purchase. Oak, mahogany, cherry, steel, different colors, different finishes, different levels of luxury for different budgets. Some had tufted satin interiors. Some had memory foam mattresses, because apparently comfort matters even when you're dead. Price tags ranged from $2,000 for the basic model to $15,000 for a hand-carved mahogany number with gold-plated handles. I'd helped Mr. Hartwell give tours of this room. I'd listened to him explain the differences to grieving families. I'd watched him guide them toward the more expensive options with gentle suggestions and sympathetic nods. Now I crouched behind one of those expensive options, the mahogany model with brass handles, and tried to catch my breath. The chanting was getting louder and closer. I could feel it vibrating through the floor, through the walls, through my bones. It was inside me now, that sound. I could feel it trying to change me from the inside out. I could hear footsteps now, lots of them. The hooded figures were inside the building, moving through the halls with that shuffling, synchronized gait, coming up the stairs. Their robes whispered against the hardwood, their feet thudded in perfect unison. Coming for me. I looked around desperately for something, anything, I could use as a weapon. The caskets themselves were too heavy to move. The pedestals were bolted to the floor. But my eyes landed on the embalming tools displayed on the wall near the door. Trocars, scalpels, forceps. A whole collection of instruments designed for working on the dead, mounted on a dark wood display board like they were trophies. I grabbed a trocar, basically a long metal spike used for draining fluids from corpses, and held it in front of me like a sword. Fat lot of good it would do against 50 people, against a dead man who wouldn't stay dead, against whatever ancient horror was reaching up from beneath the earth. But it was something to hold on to, something that made me feel like I had even the smallest chance of fighting back. The footsteps stopped outside the showroom door. Silence. Long, stretching silence. The kind that makes your muscles cramp from tension, the kind that makes you want to scream just to break it. The chanting had stopped too, I realized. Everything had stopped. The whole building was holding its breath. Then the door opened slowly, creaking on hinges that had never creaked before I knew they hadn't. I'd walked through that door a dozen times and it had never made a sound. Swinging inward inch by inch, like whatever was on the other side was savoring the moment, enjoying my fear. Silas Crane walked in. He moved differently now, not the statue stillness from the viewing room. Now he walked with a fluid grace that looked wrong on an 87-year-old body, too smooth, too controlled, like a puppet mastered by someone who'd had centuries of practice, like something wearing a human body for the first time and still figuring out how the joints worked. Behind him, filling the hallway like a flood of darkness, were the hooded figures, rows and rows of them, swaying slightly in time with the chanting that had started again, softer now, almost subliminal. Their mouths moving in perfect unison beneath those hoods. They flowed into the room behind Silas, spreading along the walls, filling the spaces between caskets. Surrounding me, there were too many of them, way too many. They shouldn't have all fit in the room, but somehow they did, pressing in until the showroom felt like a tomb. Silas stopped in front of me. The emptiness I'd seen in his eyes before had been replaced by something else. Intelligence. Ancient intelligence. The kind of intelligence that comes from existing for thousands of years, from watching civilizations rise and fall, from feeding on human worship and human sacrifice generation after generation. And beneath that intelligence, amusement. He was enjoying this. Whatever was wearing Silas Crane's body, it was having the time of its very long life. "Carol Frasier," he said. His voice was wrong, too deep, too resonant, like multiple people speaking in perfect unison through a single mouth. It echoed in ways a voice shouldn't echo, bouncing off walls that didn't exist, coming from directions that didn't make sense. "We've been waiting for you." "Stay back." I held up the trocar with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The metal spike gleamed in the pulsing light, catching reflections from the symbol that was beginning to glow beneath the carpet weight. There was a symbol on the floor. I looked down and saw it, faint but unmistakable, painted or carved into the hardwood beneath the thin carpet, pulsing with the same rhythm as the lights. "I'll use this. I swear to God I'll—" "You'll what? Kill me?" He smiled, too wide. The muscles of his face stretching in ways that shouldn't have been possible, like the skin was just a covering for something that didn't quite understand how human expressions worked. "I'm already dead, child. Have been for 3 days. My heart stopped beating. My blood stopped flowing. My brain stopped thinking any thought of its own. And yet here I stand. Here I walk. Here I speak. Death is just a door, Carol, and we have the key." "That's impossible. Impossible." He laughed, that multiple voice laugh that seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the walls and the floor and the air itself. "You know what's impossible?" Impossible is a word made up by people who've never seen what lies beneath, who've never touched the old things, who've never understood that this reality, he gestured at the room around us, at the caskets and the pedestals and the hooded figures swaying in their endless chant, is just a thin skin stretched over something much, much bigger, much, much older, much, much hungrier. What do you want? What we've always wanted. What we've worked toward for 200 years in this town, and for millennia before that, in other towns, in other countries, in other civilizations that rose and fell while we endured. He spread his arms wide, gesturing at the hooded figures behind him. Continuation. Survival. The gift that was promised to us by the sleepers beneath the earth, long before this country had a name, long before the people who lived here called themselves Americans, long before the Europeans came with their ships and their diseases and their arrogance. We were here. We have always been here. And we will be here long after your modern world crumbles to dust. You're insane. You're all insane. Perhaps. He took a step closer. The hooded figures moved with him, a wave of dark fabric, a tide of wrongness. But insanity and truth are not mutually exclusive. The old gods are real, Carol. They sleep in the spaces between atoms, in the darkness below the bedrock, in the moments between heartbeats. They dream of the day they'll rise again, and in exchange for our devotion, for our service, they grant us gifts. What kind of gifts? The kind you're about to receive. His eyes flicked past me, over my shoulder. I spun around. More of them, behind me. When had they gotten behind me? The room had only one door, and I'd been watching it the whole time, but there they were, half a dozen hooded figures standing between me and the wall, their faces hidden, their hands reaching. They rushed me from both sides. I stabbed the first one, drove the trocar straight into a hooded chest, felt it punch through fabric and flesh, felt the horrible resistance of bone, but they didn't stop, didn't even slow down. The figure I'd stabbed kept coming, hands reaching for me, the trocar sticking out of their chest like it was nothing, like I'd stuck a pin in a pillow. No blood. That's what I noticed. No blood at all, just black ichor, thick and slow, oozing from the wound like tar. They weren't human. Whatever they were, however long ago they might have been human, they weren't anymore. Hands grabbed my arms, my legs, my hair. I screamed and fought and kicked, but there were too many of them, way too many. They were everywhere, surrounding me, pressing in, and their hands were ice cold, cold like corpses, cold like things that had stopped being alive a long time ago but forgot to lie down. They dragged me out of the showroom, down the stairs, through the halls, back to the main viewing room. But the room had changed. They'd moved the chairs, arranged them in a circle around the casket, facing inward, and in the center of that circle, drawn on the floor in something dark and wet that I really, desperately hoped wasn't blood but knew absolutely was a symbol. I'd never seen anything like it. Lines and curves and angles that seemed to contradict each other, shapes that hurt to look at. The symbol seemed to move even though it was just marks on carpet. Seemed to writhe, seemed to breathe. Looking at it made me feel sick, made me feel like I was falling, made me feel like something was looking back. They threw me into the center of the circle, into the symbol. The moment my body touched those lines, I felt something, a vibration, a hum, an energy that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. It was like being connected to a live wire, but instead of electricity, it was something else, something older, something that had been waiting in the earth since before humans walked upright, since before mammals crawled out of the ocean, since before life itself took root on this little rock spinning through the void. I could feel it beneath me, beneath the floor, beneath the foundation, beneath the bedrock. Something vast and patient and hungry, stirring in its ancient sleep, reaching up toward me with tendrils of consciousness that burned where they touched my mind. The chanting intensified. The hooded figures had formed a ring around me, swaying in unison, their voices rising and falling in that impossible harmony. The words weren't English, weren't any language I'd ever heard, but somehow I understood them, fragments, pieces, words that meant vessel and gift, and forever and hunger. The symbol beneath me began to pulse. I could see it now, even with my eyes closed, burned into my vision, seared into my brain. Lines of fire tracing patterns that made my skull ache. And Silas Crane stood at the head of the circle, his arms raised, his wrong eyes fixed on me with something that might have been joy, might have been reverence, might have been the closest thing to love that whatever was wearing his body could feel. "For 200 years, we have waited," he said, his voice cut through the chanting like a knife. "For 200 years, we have served. Generation after generation, parent to child, keeping the faith, maintaining the connection. And now, on the night of alignment, we complete the ritual. We welcome our master back to the world of the living." "Please," I begged. "I'm not ashamed to admit it. I begged. I would have done anything in that moment, promised anything, sacrificed anything to make it stop. Please, I don't want any part of this. Just let me go. I won't tell anyone. I'll leave town tonight. I'll never come back. Please. Let you go? Silas laughed, that multiple voice laugh that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Dear child, you don't understand. You're not our prisoner. You're our guest of honor. You're the most important person in this room. Without you, none of this would be possible. He knelt down beside me. His face was inches from mine. Up close, I could see that his skin wasn't quite right, too smooth, too perfect, like a mask stretched over something else. Like there was a different face underneath, pressing against the surface, trying to break through. Every resurrection requires sacrifice. His voice dropped, almost gentle. A life for a life. That's the agreement. That's the price. The old gods don't give their gifts freely, Carol. Everything has a cost. Mr. Hartwell's mother didn't really fall down, he continued. She's been dead for 15 years. He received a phone call telling him to leave. Because tonight, we needed someone alone. Someone nobody would miss right away. Someone who would be here, in this building, when the storm came and the alignment was right. You planned this, all of it. For months, years, really. The timing had to be perfect. The alignment only happens once every 50 years, when certain stars reach certain positions and the barriers between worlds grow thin enough to pierce. We've been preparing for this night since before you were born, looking for the right candidate, the right vessel. He stroked my cheek with fingers that were ice cold, dead cold, the cold of something that had stopped being alive 3 days ago but refused to admit it. You should feel honored. You're not dying, Carol. You're being transformed. You're being given the greatest gift we can offer, the gift of eternal life, the gift of purpose, the gift of belonging to something so much bigger than your sad little existence. I don't want your gift. That's the beautiful part. He smiled that too wide smile, and I saw something move behind his eyes, something that wasn't Silas Crane, something that had never been human. You don't have a choice. He stood up and raised his arms. The chanting reached a fever pitch, voices layering on voices until it sounded like 1,000 people screaming in harmony. The symbol beneath me began to glow a sick, pulsing red that seemed to come from somewhere deep below, from somewhere underground, from somewhere that wasn't quite part of this world. I felt heat, spreading up from the floor, spreading into my body, into my blood, into my bones, into places I didn't know I had. It wasn't like fire. Fire would have been simple. Fire would have been clean. Fire would have destroyed, and that would have been the end. This was something else. Something that burned without consuming. Something that changed without destroying. Something that took what I was and twisted it into something new. I felt my cells rearranging, my DNA rewriting itself, base pairs shifting and recombining in patterns that had never existed in nature. My consciousness, the thing that was ME, the collection of memories and hopes and fears and experiences that made Carol Frasier a person being pushed aside, compressed, made small to make room for something much, much bigger. And I felt something else, something reaching up from below, from beneath the floor, from beneath the earth, from somewhere that wasn't quite part of this world. It was vast, vast in a way that my human mind couldn't process, couldn't comprehend, couldn't even begin to imagine. I caught glimpses, impressions of something that existed before time, before space, before the concepts of before and after had any meaning. Something that had been sleeping for eons, dreaming strange dreams in the darkness beneath reality, waiting for the moment when it would wake. Something hungry, something patient, something that had been feeding on human worship and human sacrifice for millennia, growing stronger with each offering, growing closer with each ritual. It touched my mind, and in that instant of contact, I saw everything. I saw the history of the cult, centuries of devotion, passed down from parent to child, from generation to generation. Families in Millbrook who had been part of this since the town was founded, who had founded the town specifically to have a place to practice their worship away from prying eyes. I saw the bargain they'd made, service and sacrifice in exchange for power and immortality. I saw the rituals they'd performed, the bodies they'd offered, the blood they'd spilled on symbols exactly like the one I was lying on. I saw what they really were beneath those human faces, what they'd become after years of communion with the sleepers below. Not quite human anymore, not quite anything anymore, just vessels, just puppets, just extensions of something that existed in the spaces between atoms, in the darkness beneath the bedrock of reality. And I saw what I was about to become. The pain intensified. I screamed or tried to. My voice wasn't my voice anymore. It was changing, deepening, multiplying. The sound that came out of my throat was a harmony, a chorus. All the sacrifices who had come before me, their voices preserved, their essences absorbed, all of them screaming through my mouth at once. I felt myself fragmenting, breaking apart into 1,000 pieces that were each still somehow me. I felt those pieces being examined, evaluated, sorted. I felt the thing beneath the earth, the sleeper, the old god, the hunger that had waited for millennia riffling through my memories like someone flipping through a photo album, my childhood, my first kiss, my worst fears, my deepest hopes, everything that made me, Carol Frasier, laid bare before something that viewed human consciousness the way I might view bacteria under a microscope. Interesting, it seemed to say. Useful, but so small, so limited. Let me show you what you could be. And it did. It showed me infinity. It showed me the spaces between stars, the moments between heartbeats, the darkness that existed before light. It showed me its brothers and sisters, sleeping beneath other worlds, waiting beneath other civilizations, feeding on other forms of worship. It showed me the web that connected them all, a network of hunger and patience that spanned the universe. It showed me eternity, and eternity looked back. The last thing I saw through my own eyes, through Carol Frasier's eyes, was Silas Crane standing above me, his face serene, his hands raised to the pulsing ceiling. The symbol on the floor was blazing now, so bright it hurt to look at. The last thing I heard was his voice, gentle now, almost kind, almost loving. We would like to thank you for your sacrifice. We truly appreciate it. Your life force will sustain our master's presence for another 50 years. Your body will serve as a vessel for his will. And to show our thanks to honor your contribution, we will grant you eternal life. You will join us, Carol. You will become part of something greater than yourself. I wanted to scream no, wanted to fight, wanted to refuse. But Carol Frasier, the real Carol Frasier, the girl who'd wanted a quiet job, the girl who'd had plans for Netflix and wine and frozen pizza, the girl who thought she could escape her shitty life by moving to a small town where nothing ever happened, was already gone. She dissolved like morning fog in sunlight, like she'd never existed at all, like she'd just been a rough draft, a placeholder for something more permanent. And something else opened her eyes. So, yeah, that happened. Sorry, did that get a little intense there? My bad. I forget sometimes that normal people don't like hearing about demonic possession and blood rituals and ancient gods that exist in the spaces between dimensions. It's kind of my default setting these days. Funny thing about eternal life, the marketing really undersells the downsides. Like, sure, I don't age anymore. I've been 26 for... Actually, I'm not sure how long. Time gets weird when you're partially merged with something that doesn't experience time the way humans do. Could be months, could be years, could be decades. My face looks the same in the mirror. Well, mostly the same, if you don't look too closely at the eyes. I don't get sick, don't have to worry about retirement savings or dental insurance. Very convenient. But there are trade-offs. For one thing, I'm hungry all the time now. Not for food. I tried eating a pizza a few weeks after my transformation, and let me tell you, that was a mistake. Turns out the human digestive system doesn't work right anymore when you've got an eldritch entity sharing your headspace. Everything tastes like static and regret. Very disappointing. I really missed pizza those first few months. No, I'm hungry for something else. Something harder to describe. Life force, I guess you could call it. The spark that makes a person instead of just meat and electricity. Don't worry, we don't kill everyone. That would be wasteful, unsustainable, bad for business. We just take a little here and there. A bit of vitality from the grieving widow at the funeral. A taste of hope from the young couple planning their wedding. Just enough to keep the connection strong. Just enough to feed the sleepers. Most people don't even notice. They just feel tired for a few days. Sad for no reason. Like something important has been taken from them, but they can't remember what. For another thing, I'm not exactly human anymore. I mean, I look human. Mostly. In the right light. If you don't stare too long. But the eyes are wrong. They're still blue. Still Carol's blue. But there's something behind them now. People tell me I don't blink enough. People tell me my shadow doesn't always match my movements. People don't tell me these things twice. We have ways of discouraging gossip in Millbrook. But here's the thing, the cult is actually pretty nice. Very supportive. Great potlucks. You wouldn't believe how good Mrs. Patterson's casserole is. Secret family recipe. Passed down for 200 years. Along with the demonic heritage. Everybody brings a dish. Everybody shares. Everybody pretends we're just normal small-town folks having a normal small-town gathering. The fact that we end every meeting with a blood offering to ancient gods is just, you know, a quirk. Every community has quirks. And Silas? Better boss than my manager at Denny's, that's for damn sure. Patient. Understanding. Never micromanages. At least he's never made me work a double shift on Thanksgiving. Oh, and I get to keep working at the funeral home. Isn't that hilarious? Mr. Hartwell came back the next morning, saw that everything was set up perfectly for the Crane service, and told me I did a great job. Gave me a raise. Made me full-time with benefits. He's one of us, of course. Has been for 30 years. Knew exactly what was going to happen to me that night. But he still seems genuinely happy with my chair arranging skills, so... Silver linings? The funeral for Silas Crane went beautifully, by the way. Standing room only. Everybody crying, talking about what a wonderful man he was. I stood in the back wearing my nice black dress and my employee name tag, and I smiled. Silas watched too. He was standing right next to me. Nobody else could see him. The resurrection only lasts a few hours without a constant power source, but I could see him just fine. Good turnout, he said. Very good. You were well loved. I tried to be. Love makes people vulnerable. Vulnerable people make better sacrifices. See, great boss. Really understands the business. No, I'm telling you all this for a reason. Not just because I like the sound of my own voice, although I do. It's a great voice. Very soothing. Very trustworthy. The kind of voice you'd follow into a dark funeral home without asking too many questions. I'm telling you because we're always looking for new blood. Literally. The old gods are demanding, and the alignment only provides so much power. Between alignments which happen every 50 years, mark your calendars, we need to top up. Find volunteers. Make offerings. That's where you come in. You'll see the job posting soon. Hartwell and Sons Funeral Home, Millbrook, Ohio. Now hiring. Night shift position available. No experience necessary. Training provided. Competitive wages. Excellent benefits. Quiet work environment. Sound familiar? It should. It's the same posting that brought me here. The same posting we put up every time we need a new guest of honor. The algorithm is very good at finding the right people. The lonely ones. The desperate ones. The ones who are looking for a fresh start in a quiet place where nobody knows their name. We can smell them, even through the internet, even through the screen, something about the way they phrase their searches. The 3 a.m. browsing history that screams, "Please, God, let there be something better out there." We find them, we call to them, and they come. They always come. So here's the deal. You can ignore this story, pretend it's fiction, go about your life, eat your pizza, watch your Netflix, die in 60 or 70 years like a normal person, natural causes, surrounded by loved ones. That's a valid choice. If you can actually pull it off, if you can actually forget, that's probably the smart play. Or you can come to Millbrook, take the job, work a few shifts, and then, some night, when there's a storm rolling in and the lights start to flicker, stay late. We'll find you. We always do. Eternal life, eternal service, eternal hunger. The hours are better than Denny's. The benefits are literally to die for. All it costs is everything you are. Little funeral humor for you. I'm full of those now. Actually, I'm full of a lot of things now. Things that squirm when I'm not paying attention. Things that whisper secrets in languages that haven't been spoken since before the continents split. Things that are very, very excited to meet you. So what do you say? Millbrook's waiting. And so am I. Get it? Working stiff because I work at a funeral home and I'm technically dead? God, I love this job. See you soon. Well, boys and ghouls, what a tale that was. Just how we love it. Poor Carol. All she wanted was a quiet job, decent pay, something better than overnight shifts at Denny's listening to truckers complain about their eggs. Aw, so sad. Too bad. And she got her wish, didn't she? The quietest job imaginable, working with people who never complain, never argue, never leave bad Yelp reviews. The dead are such easy customers. Of course, now Carol is the customer service, the welcoming committee, the friendly voice that lures new hires into the fold. And judging by that little speech, business is booming. If this story made you nervous about your employment situation, hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every night at 8 p.m. Central, and trust me, there's plenty more where Carol came from. Leave a like if you've ever taken a job that felt off. And drop a comment, would you take a position at Hartwell & Sons? The benefits are eternal, after all. Remember, some job offers are too good to be true, and some gifts come with strings attached. Very, very long strings that reach all the way down to things that sleep beneath the bedrock. Until next time, kiddies, read the fine print, check the references, and whatever you do, don't stay late. This has been your Late Night Creature Feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo, and we're always hiring.